Hello everyone, I'm Jenna McBride-Harris, or Dr. McB as my students call me, and today I'm going to tell you about the horn. Commonly known as the French horn, it is officially known by the International Horn Society as the horn, but it does have its origins in France, as you'll learn about during the history segment, which is why we commonly refer to it as the French horn. Okay, so the horn, what is it? It's a conical instrument, and conical means that it starts at narrow at one end and then it gets exponentially wider in diameter at an even rate until you get to the other end. If you think about a trombone or a trumpet, they're cylindrical instruments, which means that the diameter of the tubing throughout the instrument remains pretty constant until the flare at the end of the bell. Whereas horn starts quite narrow at the lead pipe and then gradually gets wider and wider and wider and wider until we get to the flare at the end. Again, we'll talk about why the horn is conical when we get into our history segment, so stay tuned. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a horn, and I'm going to show you a couple different kinds of horns that you would likely run into in the future when you are band directors or orchestra directors somewhere. So what I'm holding in my hand is a professional grade double horn. That means that professional grade just means this is a really expensive instrument and it was custom made for me. You will likely not encounter these kinds of horns in your locker rooms for your bands or orchestras. Double horn means that there are basically two instruments in one. It's like, Selsun Blue or whatever, shampoo and conditioner. It's two instruments in one. And if you can see on the side here, there are two layers of slides. The top layer is the F horn, and the bottom layer is the B flat horn. So if I were to blow into this instrument and only depress these three valves, that would only move air into these three sections of slide. Well, it moves it throughout the whole instrument, but then through these three sections here. Once I depress this, which is called the B flat trigger, sometimes it's called the B trigger because in Europe, B means B flat and H means B natural. It's also just commonly known as the trigger or the thumb valve. If I depress this and then depress these other valves in turn, then the air is redirected to the bottom layer of slides. You'll also notice that the top layer of slides, let's look at this third valve here, and this is how we number them. First is closest to the player, first, second, third valve. And then this one on the bottom corresponds to my thumb valve. The top layer is always longer. This is the F side. This is always longer than the B flat side. The B flat side of the instrument is shorter. The B flat horn is shorter than the F horn. And that will come into play when we discuss the harmonic series, which one cannot have a discussion about the horn without discussing the harmonic series. That is for sure. Okay, so now I want to tell you about a couple of kinds of horns that you will run into when you are a band director or an orchestra director. So first I'm going to tuck this away safely. All right. This is a student model double horn, and I'm starting with this case already open because I want to show you the proper way to open a horn case. I have a lot of students who come into their lessons. These are my private students, not my college kids, and they do this. This is a terrible idea because this horn, I was holding that, right? But if I hadn't been holding that and they opened the case from the top and it just plopped down, first of all, you can also see that this has now totally inverted. This is the part of the case where the instrument is supposed to be nestled. So please, please stress to your students that they need to open the case on the bottom. They need to look at which way the buckles actually attach, and you want to have the bottom side, because that means that the body of the instrument nestles on this side. So you want to have the horn on a flat surface on the floor and then open it that way. Okay, so this is a student level horn. You can see it's Pretty beat up, but still very functional. This has the same amount of slides. We've got the longer F side, we've got the shorter B flat side. You might notice that the way things are configured and wrapped is a little bit different than the horn that I was showing you a moment ago. But it does still have the 3 valves, first valve, second valve, third valve, and it has the corresponding thumb valve. In this case, you'll notice that the thumb valve is right up here. Have you know which valve corresponds to which lever? You can check it out on the back, and then it's pretty easy to see that the thumb valve goes there, first valve goes there, second valve there, third valve there. Okay, so this is a double horn. This is a Reynolds. We'll talk about brands later, but this is an instrument that you would probably find in your locker rooms. Something else you might find, particularly if you are in beginning bands, if you're a middle school director, would be a single horn. So again, I'm going to find which way these attach. This is the bigger one. I know that the instrument is nestled in this side of the case. So I'm going to lay that down and unlatch. Sometimes there are like 4 latches, so you just got to be careful and make sure that doesn't hit my very expensive horn. By the way, just briefly talking about prices of instruments, a student model double horn is going to run you somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000. Maybe not you as a band director, but as an individual looking to purchase an instrument. A single horn, you could probably find these honestly on the internet for like a couple $100. They're not that expensive. Once you get into professional grade, I won't tell you exactly how much this instrument costs, but I will say that it's about in the middle. The professional grade range is about $8,000 up to $25,000. So it's definitely an investment, but this is what I'm doing with my career. Okay, I don't really know where to put this right now. I'm going to give it to my invisible cameraman. All right, so this is a single horn. How do we know that this is a single horn? Well, there's only one layer of slides, right? I don't have a second layer. I also do not have a thumb valve. Instead, I've got this little prison, this little rest for my thumb to go. Okay, so single horns are pretty common. People used to start young students exclusively on single horns. This is a single F horn. They also have single B flat horns. Remember that the double horns that I showed you earlier are a combination of F and B flat horns. So this is a single F horn. There's a lot of controversy about whether we should begin students on single horns versus double horns. I think that I take kind of a flexible view on that. If you have a student that is particularly petite, the double horn may be a little bit too heavy for that student. It may be too difficult for them to produce. I mean, 6th graders can be really small. So if you have a petite student, someone that's a little more delicate, I might suggest giving them a single horn to start out with. Maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe you're in a small school, in a small community, and all you have are single horns. If that's all you have, that's okay. So I do like if horns are available and a student is of a stature to be able to handle a double instrument, I prefer to start students on a double horn so that they are learning how to navigate both sides of the instrument right away. Okay, so these are single and double horns. And we do also have triple horns that are played professionally. I don't have a triple horn with me. Triple horns are configured in different ways, but they do have 3 layers of slides, just as the double horns have 2 layers of slides. Triple horns are not really something that you as band directors or orchestra directors really need to worry about at the high school level. Triple horns are generally only played by full-time professional musicians, particularly first horn players, because the third layer, the third horn that's stacked on top, is a smaller horn to help them have stability and accuracy in the higher register. So a triple horn might sit in F, then have a B flat on top of that, and then a high E flat or a high F on top of that. Sometimes triple horns sit in B flat, and then they have a high F and a high B flat on top of that. There are all sorts of configurations with third horns, triple horns. You don't really need to worry about that right now. Okay, so now I want to talk about the anatomy of these horns. All right, so you've got a mouthpiece. The horn mouthpiece is very different from the other mouthpieces of the brass. It is funnel shaped so that the cup narrows as we go down. It's also conical in shape if you think about it. It has a narrower cup than, say, trumpet or tuba or trombone. And the cool thing about the horn is that it's actually quite long. A single F horn, if we were to unwrap it, would be 13 feet long. And if we unwrap a double horn, which is the F and B flat put together, that's 21 feet. And so the longer, we'll talk more about this with harmonic series, but the longer a span of tubing or a span of string, the lower the instrument plays. Think about an upright bass and how long those strings are. And the upright bass is a very low instrument. Okay, so we have an instrument, a brass instrument that is quite long, which means it has the capacity to play. You'd think that this would be a very low sounding instrument, but we are playing quite a small mouthpiece, which is what makes the horn so unique. It means that we have a huge range and we have the capacity to play very low notes right down into the trombone, bass trombone range. And we also have that, because of this small mouthpiece, we have the capacity to play very high notes and hang with the upper woodwinds and hang with the trumpets. So that's one of the reasons the horn has such a huge range. Okay, so this is the horn mouthpiece. The mouthpiece gets inserted, I might as well just insert it here, into the lead pipe. This is called the lead pipe. And the lead pipe is what feeds directly into the rest of the instrument. Okay, when horns are built, this is separate from the bell and its tail. Okay, so mouthpiece goes into the lead pipe, and then the lead pipe goes into the main tuning slide. This tuning slide right here is going to tune the whole instrument. Okay, so whatever you do here affects every single valve. Okay, so you really only want to move this, and we'll talk about tuning the instrument later. You really only want to move this sparingly, and then for specific valve combinations that tend sharp or flat, you want to make adjustments at the slides, at the valve specifically. Okay, so this is the main tuning slide. This is another tuning slide for a little more fine tuning. So the slides that are on the back of the instrument are for main tuning for the whole instrument. Okay, this is what we commonly call the bell, but actually this is the flare of the bell, and the whole bell is this whole business right up until this solder joint. So this is the bell, this whole system here. This is what we call the throat, and the width of this, the diameter of this, changes depending on the brand of the horn, the wrap of the horn. How all of this business is configured is called the wrap. Okay, so you'll notice that even between these two, I mean, obviously they have different amounts of tubing, but they have different wraps. They're configured differently. There are different bends, and those bends one isn't necessarily better than another. They're just different, just like different car brands and car models. They have their pros and cons. Okay, so in a double horn, which is what we'll now kind of switch over and spend the rest of our time together talking about, because most advanced middle school and high school students are going to be playing double horns, we have first valve, second valve, third valve, and then the B flat valve, or the thumb trigger. These valves, what happens when we depress these valves, and actually I have a valve section right here, is that the air then is redirected not only through this length in the back, but is then redirected here, so it's actually getting longer. If I play this instrument, that is a concert C. If I play that note, I haven't depressed any valves. Now, if I depress the second valve, the pitch lowers by half a step. I have made this longer. Okay, there's a correlation between length and pitch. The shorter the length of tubing or strings, the higher the pitch. The longer the length of tubing or strings, the lower the pitch. Just think about a violin versus an upright bass. Okay, so I'm not depressing anything. This is just the length of the instrument without added valves. Okay, when I depress the second valve, it goes down half a step because I've added this much length. That's it. Just this little guy right here brings that pitch down a half step. Now if I depress the first valve, that means that these little portals are opened and the air gets redirected into these portals into the corresponding valve. And now I'm going to add this much length to the horn. So now I've gone down a whole step. Remember we started here? Okay, so this brought us down a half step, this brought us down a whole step. So if I put them together, that should be 1.5 steps, right? It's actually a little bit high, which is where the third valve comes in. The third valve is meant to be a tuning valve, an alternate for valve combinations of 1 and 2. And on many horns, it's actually flat. Listen. Sorry. Sometimes that extra flatness is what we need in a particular chord, and sometimes it's too flat. So that can be used at the player's discretion. All right, so there's one other kind of horn that I don't have an example of with me here today, but that you may encounter in your locker rooms. And you might be like, what the heck is this? There are horns called compensating doubles. I actually have a student who has a compensating double. His mom found it online. You can find these for like $100, $150. But be very careful. These compensating doubles are not 2 full horns put together, right? As I said earlier, I have the entire length of an F horn available to me with this top section of tubing. And I have the entire length of a B flat horn available to me with the bottom section of tubing. So this is 2 horns in 1. A compensating double, as I understand it, still has 2 different sections of tubing, but the whole length of the horn, because the B flat horn is smaller than, shorter than the F horn, remember, is about the length of the F horn, and then it just takes away length somehow. I don't fully understand the compensating double, I'm going to be totally honest with you, because we so rarely encounter it, but it has lots of tuning issues, and it has, even my student who's 14 who plays a compensating double is overblowing it. It's a smaller instrument, the sound crackles and breaks and gets really edgy really fast, and it's got intonation issues. So if you have compensating doubles, you'll know that they're not a real double horn because the lengths of tubing are kind of strange. They are not ideal, and it would be best if we just sort of like phased those out of use. So if you have a compensating double, I would say play a single over that, just because the tuning is going to be better. But ideally, you could give your students double horns. Okay. So we've talked about the anatomy of the instrument. I showed you a few different kinds of horns. Now, who is the horn for? Who would be the ideal student to pick up the horn? As we'll discuss in the rest of this video series, the harmonic series and how that comes into play is really important for playing the horn. And what that means on a practical level is that a student who plays the horn has to have a really strong ear. So if you've got a student who has already had piano experience, can already read music, and has a strong ear and has shown a strong aptitude, actually particularly students who like to sing, students who might have choral background, those would be really great candidates to play the horn because they have a strong ear. They're able to replicate pitch. They're able to match pitch. If you sing to them and they can sing back to you in the correct pitch, those might be really strong candidates for the horn. The horn is for students who love challenges, students who are go-getters, students who are not going to be upset by the very humbling experiences that are sure to come their way by playing the horn. So horn is for students with strong ears, students who might have a choral or piano background already, and students who are highly motivated and love a challenge. And the horn will teach whoever learns it some lessons in humility and resilience, but it is extremely rewarding. Okay, so now we're going to transition into talking about the history of the instrument. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the instrument, the history of the horn. The very first horns were not really the musical giants that they are today, but they were very functional and practical tools. The early horns were made out of natural materials. They were literally like horns from animals, or like rhino horns, or thinking about tusks from mammoths. So they were horns made of animal bone. It's not really bone, but animal horns. Or in communities that live near the ocean, they were seashells, like conchas. And these early horns were used as signaling devices. So they were used for things like military purposes because they could carry sound across vast distances. So they were used to signal civic events inside towns and cities, settlements. They were used for military purposes to signal attacks or retreats or call for help, that kind of thing. And then eventually they came to be used for hunting because you'd have groups of men predominantly. Well, not predominantly, this is history we're talking about. It was all men hunting. You had groups of men going out and they needed to communicate with one another. So I'm going to show you some images coming up of some early instruments, some early horns. So they were made out of natural materials, but then as we got into the Bronze Age and metalworking became more prevalent, they started taking that conical shape that you see in a horn. Think about like the narrow end getting wider, or from a conch shell, again, narrow end and kind of spitting out into a wider diameter. They took that same conical shape and then turned that into instruments made of metal. Okay, so the horn, as we are more familiar with it, something that looks a little more similar to what we're used to today, really started developing by the 1600s, the 17th century. These were instruments that were one enormous long length of tubing that was then wrapped. Some of them were wrapped quite tightly so that they could be on saddle pommels, again used for signaling, or like carried along your hip. If you were a watchman or a town crier or something, you could just signal something. And then there were these enormous hunting horns that were wrapped quite wide so that it could actually be worn like crossbody, so that you would actually wear this instrument while you were on the in the saddle riding a horse. The Palace of Versailles, which was quite opulent, King Louis, I think it was the 14th, maybe the 15th, I think the 14th. You'll just gonna have to go look it up. Anyway, loved to hunt, and so he employed several hunting horns who were there as part of his retinue for hunting. And there's actually a really rich hunting horn tradition in France. They had very specific calls, they still do, that would say things like, the dogs caught the scent, the dogs lost the scent, we spotted prey, it had this many antlers, we saw a fox, we saw a deer, we saw an elk, like that specific. So they had these very specific calls and things that they would do because these were how the horns were how they communicated across the forest or across the meadows, vast distances. And so these large hunting horns were very good at carrying sound across vast distances. but did not sound particularly beautiful up close. And I will provide some links for some trompe de chasse, which is the modern day version of these hunting horns. They're still in use in France. There's a huge tradition surrounding them, surrounding these trompe de chasse. And so if you take a look at some of those, you'll be able to hear it doesn't really sound like what we associate the horn sound with. These were not indoor instruments. They were not a part of orchestras until they started getting developed into something that we are familiar with. As the story goes, there was a young prince, Prince Anton von Spork, who was on a grand tour, meaning he was taking a big vacation around all of the different palaces and principalities in Europe. And so young Prince Anton visited Versailles, and he was just overwhelmed by the hunting horns and by their spectacle and the sound. He'd never heard anything like it. By the way, he was Prince of Bohemia, and so he made two of his servants, oh my goodness, I don't remember their names. It's irrelevant to the story. He made two of his servants stay and learn these hunting instruments. They actually weren't allowed to return home to their families until they had learned the hunting horn. And so they brought that tradition and those instruments back to Bohemia. Bohemia at the time was the seat of some very talented metal workers, and they started tinkering with the hunting horn. They started widening the throat. Again, that's the part near the bell flare. They started changing the shape of the mouthpiece. They started experimenting with changing the diameters of the instrument, the bends of the instrument. Okay, so even with these modifications, these natural horns or hunting horns, sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, or even Waldhorn, they are different kinds of horns, but they're very small nuanced differences. So if someone says hunting horn or natural horn or Waldhorn, they're kind of referring to an instrument, a horn without valves. So these hunting horns, these Waldhorns, had no valves. So just like a bugle, they could only play the notes that were available on the harmonic series. And so they couldn't play things like a major scale. They could only play they also couldn't tune the instrument. There were no tuning slides. So whatever the pitch of the horn was, like that's what it was. And as you'll hear in the harmonic series video portion, there are certain partials that are a little too flat to our ears or a little too sharp to our ears. So there were some downsides to these natural horns. Until one day, another Bohemian, Anton Hampel, was experimenting with the horn. Now, pardon me, because these hunting horns, so just pretend that this isn't here, you don't see anything. Because these were used as signaling instruments, they used to play them with the bell in the air like this, or on the side, because you're trying to get the sound out into the distance. They had their hands outside of the bell. And so one day, Anton Hampel, he was observing that oboists would sometimes put cotton or some sort of other absorbent material inside the bells of their oboes to dampen the sound or to change the color. And he was like, I wonder what happens if I put cotton in my horn. So he did that and didn't really like the sound. And then he was like, what if I put my hand in there? What will that do to the sound? And he found that it actually changed it quite a bit. So here I'm going to play without my hand in the bell. Okay, I'm still going to have bell up, but put my hand in there. And then it changes even more if I bring it down here. Takes an edge off of the sound. It makes it warmer. And so we're going to get into what the point of the right hand is. But it's important to know that that's kind of the background of the instrument. Also, I'm going to show you, this is a common thing that you might be familiar with the horn, which is emptying water. I could hear some crackling, maybe you did too. I've got a water key right here. and that's where I'm gonna start. Not a lot is coming out. So best places, wasn't planning on talking about water removal, but here we are. One of the best places to start is with the tuning slide, which is in the back. So you take out that main tuning slide and check to see if there's any water there, and then check to see if there's any there. A little bit came out. With a lot of the kinds of wraps that you have available to you, or that you will have available to you in your band storage rooms, check the B-flat third valve. Oh, some came out. I don't know if you can see. Yep, it's still coming out. All right. Usually there's a lot that collects in this B-flat third valve. There you saw some. On my horn, the way my horn is wrapped, a lot of water will come out the bell. So if you want the water to come out the bell, you spin the horn clockwise. If you want water to come out of the lead pipe, you spin the horn counterclockwise. I have young students who are disgusting and they leave their mouthpiece on and they empty the water through their mouthpiece and then they put it back on their mouth. I think that's disgusting, and your horn is going to give you some sort of like, I guess, yeah, not an STD. That's impossible. But I mean, who knows? So don't do that. I hope I won't get fired for saying STD in this video. So check out, oh right, that is so satisfying. Only horn players fully understand the deep satisfaction that comes from having an enormous amount of water come out of your bell. All right, so I think that's pretty empty for now. Okay, so where did I leave off? Oh yes, Anton Hampel. So he was like, oh my gosh, I put my hand in the bell and it changes the sound. So we will talk a little bit more about how it changes the sound and what that means for the history of the instrument in future videos. Here's a great example of metal workers imitating natural horns or natural materials. This is a lure from the late Bronze Age. It looks like a mammoth tusk. Here is an engraving from the 18th century, but it depicts hunting horns or parforce horns where the metal is bent into a wide circumference to be worn cross-body or on the side of the body during the hunt. This is a Waldhorn, which is very similar to the parforce horn. You can see there are two bends in the circumference and then a very narrow throat and small bell. As time went on, the bell flare is widened and the throat is also widened. And then there are extra lengths of tubing called couplers and crooks that allow for more options with the harmonic series. The player can play more notes. This is a core solo, which would be a horn that a horn soloist would play. And it's pitched in concert D. That's the crook there in the center, those loopy twists. And the valve was invented in 1815, and this is a horn from after that period with 3 valves and paintings along the inside of the bell flare. All right, so this is the harmonic series, and the harmonic series are all of the notes that occur on any given length of tubing, in our case, or strings, and these represent all of the notes that are possible on any one valve combination. It's a series because the distance between these intervals, or partials, or harmonics, those are all the same terms for the same thing, doesn't change no matter what valve we're starting on, no matter what pitch we're starting on. The first note is called the fundamental, and the lowest note possible on the horn, as you can see, is that low C, or a concert F. And so it's C in Hornland, concert F for the rest of you. That's why we're pitched in F. I don't know if you knew that, but the lowest fundamental possible on an instrument is what it's then pitched in. Okay, I'm going to play this series starting on the second partial. And again on a different valve. So you'll notice that the partials get much more narrow as we go up. Now this area right here is a problem area for young musicians. All of these notes are available on the open fingering. So if you ask a student to start to play a C, a horn C, concert F, they might end up playing an E or a G. And as you look at the top of the range, things are in half steps, which is why students miss a lot of notes at the high end.